Hello, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch, and welcome to a quick hands-on with the Cocos Creator. Cocos Creator was actually released today in beta form, and it's part of the Cocos 2DX project. Now, Cocos 2DX itself is inspired by the Cocos 2D project, which in turn was inspired by Cocos, which from 15 or 20 years ago was a Python library. Now, Cocos 2D came to fame for being probably the preeminent 2D game library for iOS, and was written in Objective-C. And then the Cocos 2DX project came along and ported it to C++ originally. But there were also ports to other languages such as JavaScript, .NET, etc. And Cocos Creator itself is working over top of the Cocos 2DX JavaScript layer. It's got a custom version of the Cocos 2DX JavaScript libraries built in underneath. And it's very similar in scope to the QICI editor that we looked at a couple weeks back. So it's a complete visual editing environment for doing Cocos development. And as I said, it was released today, so I don't have a ton of experience working with it. I've just been playing with it for the last couple hours before getting ready to do this video. So if I stumble a bit or I show things off wrong, I do apologize. Like I said, this is a very new product. Also at the same time, there's a couple of warts here and there. Some of the internalization or the documentation is still in Chinese, for example. The documentation a lot of times is completely stubbed, but you can see where they're going with this. So it is definitely a beta, and it looks like a beta, but for stability-wise, it hasn't been bad at all. Now, first off, you can grab it from the Cocos 2DX website. It's called Cocos Creator, and it's available for Mac and Windows. Now, it's another these HTML5 apps that's wrapped in the Electron wrapper. So, like the Superpowers or QICI engine, it actually seems like very much like a native app, even though it is technically a HTML5 application. And here you can see the download for me. It was 190 megabytes. So it's not the smallest thing you've ever pulled down, but you just basically download it, extract it to a folder, and then inside of that folder, oops, that's the wrong folder. All right, well, we'll go to it anyways. Extract it out. It's like so, creates a folder called Cocos Creator, and inside there is an executable called Cocos Creator. And I've already run this, so it might actually get mad at me at the moment. Actually didn't do too bad. So, first time you come in, it's going to ask you for your Cocos developer login. Now, sadly, I don't actually know where this comes from because I already had one. But I believe I've only ever signed up for using the forum. So I think it's the same login as the forum. Regardless, I've signed up for this ages ago, and I don't get spammed by them. So don't worry about giving them your email address or anything like that. But you do have to give a login. There is no cost or anything involved in this. So just go ahead and log in. The first time you run it, it's going to probably ask you for to do an exception for your firewall if you're on Windows. And we can go ahead. We can either create a new project, and they've got the templates for Hello World, an empty project, and an examples collection. And this is the standard Cocos 2DX examples, a lot of things showing how various codes, but it doesn't work that well in this particular environment. So I'm just going to go with, I'll show you the example Hello World, and then we'll download one of their examples in a second. Pick where you want it to be. So we'll go c:/temp/Cocos/hello. And we'll go ahead and just create that. Okay, so there's the firewall exception. So it's the first time I've actually run it on this computer. I was trying it out on my other computer. And here you go. This is Cocos Creator's main environment. Now you'll see it's very traditional, very typical, I guess I should say, of modern game editors. They've taken a component-based approach like we are very used to seeing, and your layout is very similar. Over here you have your scene graph, basically the hierarchy of things that go in your scene. Over here you have your assets. Now interestingly, when it starts, the scene is not saved. So scenes are an asset. So you can switch between the scenes that appear up here by double-clicking them down here. But you can see like a hierarchy of the different things that go together. So if we go here, Hello World is a graphic. You can see right here, it's a sprite. And then you can see the sprite has a component, which is the region, or the defining rectangle that contains it. There's a script here, and you see when we grab the script, there's a preview that's shown in the inspector, or we can double-click the script and actually bring up an integrated editor. Let's see if there is auto-completion. Yes, there is. So there is full code highlighting and auto-completion available within the integrated editor. So that's definitely nice to see. And save. What are you? I'm not sure what that is. Oh, that's the scene. Okay, never mind. So this is basically how your code is all brought together. I'm going to show this with a different example, so I'm going to come back in a little bit. But basically, your scene is authored right up here. You got your traditional movement options. The top level thing for pretty much all things in the hierarchy. So you see here, we've got a canvas, and the canvas owns 3 different nodes. So we got the background, the Cocos logo, and a label. And the label and the Cocos and even the background, you can see they're all built up of components over here by looking in the inspector. So our Cocos sprite that we see here, and we can manipulate using this widget like so, is contains a node and a sprite. So it's a typical component-based approach. You add new functionality by adding components. Your various components available, like so. You've got the UI components you can use to build complex UIs. You have animation components and custom components. Now, a custom component is actually a script. So this is how you can attach your script to a component. And let's get out of there. So this is your typical editor. You've got your scale, rotate, scale, rotate, translate, and the rect gizmo for changing the size from the edges and the position. As you make changes here, you'll see they're updated here. Ditto, you can confine to a single axis by using the appropriate widget, axis widget. So yeah, basically this is your editor. You lay things out this way. Your origin is marked by these graphs. So 0, 0 is the origin of your game world. And then when you're ready to preview it, just click play. It loads up your browser, and there is your application. So it's a very straightforward approach. It's very straightforward to work with. From my experience so far, it's also quite stable. So I haven't actually had a crash or a slowdown or anything like that. You got a couple things built up here. So this is a lot of the same stuff that you saw in other menus. So we can add to our scene by using this plus here, or the way we just showed up here. The same way as you can attach components using this, or you select the item you want to attach the component to and add it that way. So your menu up here is mostly redundant or duplicated effort. Again, here are your various toggleable components. So your timeline for animations is available down here. Your assets are down here. Your hierarchy view is here. Your inspector view is here. You can toggle their visibility via the panel menu. The next thing you saw is your assets. Your assets can be brought in drag and drop from Windows Explorer. So if we have, say, an image file, I don't know if I have one on my desktop, do I? No, of course I don't. Well, if you have an image file that's supported, you literally just drag and drop it onto here, or we can add a new asset by clicking here. Oh, actually, you can't. So it is drag and drop only. The scripting supports the JavaScript language and the CoffeeScript language. We'll look at that in a second. I'm going to go through the help first. So after you can switch your very mobile focus, so you can switch between a portrait and I believe classical is also known as landscape version. And you got some developer options here, like we can bring up, we can preview the UI that we've worked with, packaging, etc. At the same time, you can also build for Android directly in here, but you have to go into your preferences and configure your NDK path, etc. So now, since I've already done the Cocos setup, this is so I have Cocos 2DX installed on this machine, and part of the Cocos 2DX is to run a setup utility, which basically gives and sets all the path for these various things. So I don't have to configure them because it's already pulling it from my Cocos install. So that's a nice touch if you've got Cocos going already. But basically, that's it. This is very kind of straightforward, very intuitive, very easy to use for the most part. Now let's go into the help. Now help is, it's definitely nice to see it, and it's going to be a great thing eventually, but for now, this just brings up the integrated manual, and you'll see it's definitely a good start. The documentation is hit or miss, so we've got documentation on Hello World. Basically all that we just covered is to some degree documented, as is there's the Rosetta Stones kind of approach for, if you're a Unity developer, here is the equivalence in working with Cocos Studio documentation here. But as we get down a little bit more, we're good here under the basics for the editor, but then we get into the assets. And this is one of those things I actually needed. I needed to figure out how to bring in a sprite atlas, for example, and you've got a lot of this, which is somewhat unfortunately. So you go through quite a few of these, and you will have coming soon type stuff. But for the most part, it is well documented, so the placeholders will eventually be removed, and a lot of what you want to find is in there. And ultimately, this is Cocos 2DX. So if you look at the Cocos 2DX HTML5 documentation, you're kind of doing it all that way anyways. It's just you're attaching a script. Now, I'm actually going to go back and go to this quick start right here. And this brings us to the demos. Oops, I don't actually want to run the demo. Help. User manual. Oh, I guess I'll actually finish my train of thought before downloading that guy. So we also have an API reference, which is nice. So basically here is the quick look at the various classes and their purpose and meaning, their parameters that are taken, etc. So the documentation is nicely integrated. So the only real downside there is the stubbing. And then lastly, there's links into the forums, but this actually brings you to the Coco China forums, which if you're not able to read Chinese is a bit of a trick. And we also found the default starting project is also labeled entirely in Chinese, which is a bit of a catch too. So hopefully in time those get polished up and English versions are released. But the wording of the English documentation is very clear. It's not a matter of English. It's very well written in that regards, and you don't have a lot of trouble trying to grok what they're saying. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty understandable. All right, so back to my earlier train of thought there. If you come in here, go to the quick start, you'll find they've actually got a project that you can get that's pre-configured and ready to go. I'm just going to go ahead and download that guy, and I'll save it to my desktop, like so. And I'll just go ahead and extract that guy. Okay, so that's a completed project. Now I'm just going to come in here and go open project. That's not what I want. This is a little unintuitive, as is this. This is a little confusing. There's a close and there's a quit, and they both do the same thing. So I don't know why both of those are there. But we want to, don't save. So I don't know why the open project button on the one hand does one thing and then the other one brings you back here. So there's a little bit of UI cleaning they have to do, just streamline the experience, because there's a couple things that you would expect to behave one way and they don't at all. And then there's some things that are kind of basically duplicates of the same process. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. Let's see, it's actually, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Open others, desktop, complete project. Assets, okay, it's complete project. All right, so select that guy. Oops, can't find, all right. Desktop. Did I screw something up? All right, I'm gonna grab this guy wrong. No, it's right there, complete project. Complete project, select. Okay, I must have just grabbed the wrong folder. Give it a sec to load. So this is a very quick, easy, simple project that comes that you can start and play with, but it does show how the code is hooked up. So I'm going from there. All right, so we just go ahead, we can come down here and we can load our scene. So you can see here's our game scene, and you see it instantly comes up, and its class hierarchy is here. You can inherit nodes to other nodes by basically making the thing a child when you create it. So if we create another node underneath, such as a sprite, it will be parented to whatever the parent node is. But here you can see the layout of our world. So we've got the background image, like so. We have the ground, we have the player, and we have a score, which is just a text field up above. So quite simple, quite straightforward. We'll go ahead and play this. If this makes your ears bleed, I'm apologizing. And it's simple. You just, all right, focus. And there's the WASD keys to go ahead and bounce and grab stars. And before I deafen you, I will shut that down. But you can see there is a very simple game created in Cocos Creator. And I believe there's a tutorial that walks you through actually going ahead and creating this guy. But the structure you can see quite simply. So here is our player, and our player logic is hooked up. So our player here, you can see, has a sprite attached. And you can bring the sprites in basically just by dragging and dropping over to here. Sprite frame is when you have an atlas with multiple different frames, or sprite sheet with multiple frames of animation. Coincidentally, the atlas I created, ended up having to create it using an external tool, texture packer, and exporting it as a plist. And then I just dragged the plist into here. Now if we go down here, I think we actually can see an example. No, you can't. You can see how you've got this one rectangle or region within this texture. Well, you can actually have 20, 30, 40 to correspond with your actual frames, and those will be imported automatically when you drop a plist file on here containing an animation. So like I said, I use the texture packer tool to do this. You could probably use whatever you want, but there is no way that I found integrated in the Cocos Creator to actually create a texture atlas, which is a bit disappointing. Hopefully that's something that they add at some point in the future. But back to your point, so you've got a sprite component attached to the player node, and the sprite component also has a player. Now a player is a script that is attached here, and you can see exposed variables like so. I believe I can open the script. No, I can't. It just creates a to-do. All right, so I'll open it up this way. So go over here to the scripts folder, and that's the player script. And we'll open it up directly. So you can see the properties that we saw right here were automatically exposed as parameters right here. So the integration back and forth is quite simple, quite easy. But the key thing to understand is the way you program your game. Now, there's another part of the Chinese popping up, is the documentation for the example project is quite obviously in Chinese at this point, but it's still quite legible. It's easy to understand in English, but hopefully in time this all gets ported as well, or localized, I guess. But you can see ultimately everything is kind of hooked up as components. And you build it in, you set your various functions. Your program lifecycle has different callbacks like on load, which is called when it's created, on update, which is passed in the delta since the last time it was called, etc. And this is how you kind of control your game objects or your game world, or pretty much everything. Everything is basically implemented as a component, and it's quite simple for the most part to deal with. And at the same time, so your player has, this is attached as a node to your player's node, but you can see you can easily reach up to the player. So this player itself, if we go back here, we'll look, it has this node attached to it, and we can easily access that in code. You can see right here, just with, where am I going to take, right there. So this .node.x, or you could get the other components that are attached programmatically as well. And really all you do is you respond to these various callback events or your own stuff as you require it. So like here's some player-defined methods that then we in turn call with onLoad, for example, calls set input control, which then calls into standard Cocos type stuff. So here you're calling the event manager and adding an event listener that's going to respond to various key presses, etc. So it's very Cocos style coding, but it's all enabled by attaching scripts to nodes within your world, and those scripts are ultimately components. Now you can also see the game script here. This is controlling the logic of the entire game itself. Once again, it's just a component, as is the code that is attached to the stars in the player's world. And you see, if I go back to the game, I think it's actually instancing the stars. Yeah, so you see, we're adding new stars. So there's no stars here. The star is not, so we have a graphic for a star. You can see it down here. Ta-da! But they're not instanced by drag and drop. Instead, they're created programmatically. We can see here in the game class. So we've got the constructor, spawn new star, and you see programmatically creating things. So your game can still be entirely programmatic if you wish, but the life cycle stuff, the events are all attached as scripts in the editor that are in turn components. So it's a pretty straightforward way of doing things. It's a pretty common way of doing things with game engines these days anyways. But you do need to obviously be familiar with the Cocos library. But it is well documented, and like I said, if we come up here, there is a reference, pretty good reference guide already built in. So any of this stuff you need information on, it should be there for you. And really, that's kind of the crux of it. It's fairly straightforward. The only thing I didn't actually show you, and I don't actually have a sprite sheet to show it, but there is a nice animation timeline thing here too, so you can easily define frames of animation, tweens between events. You can animate or keyframe on just about everything, such as the size, the shape, the scale, the rotation, etc. Or you can just switch between frames. So you can easily create different animations down here, such as walk, jump, etc. And then use those programmatically, or you can attach them. If we come back here, for example, and I add a component, I can easily add an animation to any guy, or etc. So there is an animation timeline. If you're familiar with most animation tools that have a timeline, it works exactly like you expect. You do this guy to set your keyframes. You can travel between them with the VCR stock controls. Your time elapsed is up here. Your speed, playback speed's down here, etc. So it's very straightforward to work with, but I don't really have any assets to actually demo it for you right now. But that is essentially it. This is Cocos Studio. If there's more interest in or any questions of something I didn't cover, let me know. But it kind of is what it is. You organize your scene into a hierarchy of nodes. They can contain in turn other nodes. Those nodes themselves have components. This is all stuff we've seen before. It's pretty common. The programmatic link, again, is by creating scripts, and those scripts also ultimately are created from components. But don't worry, you don't need to know all this gibberish. You can actually just come on in here. So I'm going to highlight scripts here and go just new. And then you can create either a JavaScript or a CoffeeScript. And JavaScript, and there's our new script to start from. Oops, where did you go? New script. I'll move that into the scripts folder and I will show it to you again. So this gives you sort of like a default script to work from, and the rest is really up to you. So your logic starts this way. Either hook this up to your scene itself for global level stuff, or you can open it up to nodes within your scene for, attach it to your player, attach it to enemies, attach it to empty nodes, etc. And then you have access to all of the underlying Cocos 2DX functionality. Now there are a few things missing from here I'd like to see, at least that I haven't had access to. There's no physics component hookup, so you can't divide physics shapes, etc. Yet. So it'd be nice to be able to grab this guy and then basically add a component physics. And I'm assuming this is going to come at a future point, but it's not here yet, which is unfortunate. There you can see actually though, there is the script I just created. So you could attach it quite easily just by going boom, and that script will now be called per frame or on creation, etc. for whenever that node is interacted with. So very straightforward, very simple concept, but very stable, does exactly what you would expect, works very well. The performance is fine. It does not feel like a web application in any way whatsoever. So that part I'm definitely impressed with. So anyways, that is Cocos Creator, part of the Cocos 2DX project. It is available today in beta. It's completely free. You can grab it from the website, which is cocos2d-x. .org, and that's about it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of it. Let me know if you want to see more coverage. But that's it for now. See y'all later. Bye.